Good afternoon. We will begin the Wednesday, May 2nd, 2018 Finance and Safety Committee meeting. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion and second? Moved by Vilhauer, second by Albertson. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. The second item on the agenda is public comment period, and this is the time for people who may wish to come forward. And if you do so, please state your name into the microphone. Make sure the microphone's green light is on.
Oh, it's on. My name is Christy Lickey, and I work at the Cottington County Heritage Museum. We had talked with Mayor Karen a little bit, and then we watched a video of a city council session, and we saw that there were a lot of questions, and so we thought it would be great for us to come and answer your questions. So we brought all sorts of information and answers about the information about the old Carnegie Library that we use as a museum now.
Do I get to introduce myself?
I suppose.
I'm Roger Whittle. I'm president of the Cottington County Historical Society Board.
Thank you. Who has questions? Councilman Vilhauer?
Well, I'll jump in because it was probably my comments that are prompting your appearance here today. And what I had posed purely out of ignorance was in reviewing the 990 for this a year ago for 2016, which is a public document. I'm sure you're aware of that. I just pointed out that you were sitting on, as of the end of 2016, and I don't remember the dollar amount right now, and just pose the question as far as what the plans are as far as utilization of that money at some point in the future.
Sure. We received a bequest in 1980 from Clifford Sanders, who had been a member of the Watertown community, and that was to, the money was to be used to create and maintain a historical society in Watertown. And so we do use the interest off of that money to pay our bills. We have, at any time, it's been over $400,000 since I started there, but lately it's been going down a little bit. But we use the interest to pay our bills. We have a yearly budget of about $92,000, and probably almost a third of that comes from the interest and dividends from the trust money. So if we spent all of that, then we wouldn't be able to be open year-round or have all the staff that we have, because that's our biggest expense, is the staff.
We'd be coming to you every year for operating expenses, and we're sure you don't want that.
Just a follow-up then, I don't know who prepares your 990, but you may want to suggest that they classify on the bottom section of the 990 in the balance sheet how that's presented, because that's shown as being undesignated reserves to be used for whatever purpose. There are several different categorizations that, if those are really restricted or endowed, which I'm not doubting what you're telling me, folks, you may want to have whoever prepares your 990 change that classification on the return so that doesn't lend confusion for someone looking at your tax return going forward. Because that's where my question came from, is because they were shown as being undesignated reserves to be used for any purpose that you could. Whereas you're telling me that the principal is really restricted or endowed, even the way it sounds.
Well, I don't know that that's what we use it for. But I don't know that there are strict rules about what we are supposed to use it for.
We have dipped into that reserve, into that fund for for repairs in the past.
You just don't want to.
We just don't want to.
Right.
Because every time we dip into it, of course, it reduces our operating income.
Once you restrict it, you don't have that option anymore.
Yeah.
And can I share this?
Yeah.
Since 2012, we have used $16,700 from that fund for repairs on the building. So.
And we've spent almost $40,000 using grant money to make repairs to the building over the past 5 years. So we're not just like waiting for things to fall down and then be like, hey, somebody fix our building. We're really trying. But some of the things, what started this all is we wanted to replace the bathroom sink. And when the plumber came, he said, you have galvanized pipes? Do you drink this water? And we do, or at least we used to. So they wouldn't replace the sink because the plumbing is so outdated that they said we needed to replumb the whole building. And the lighting, when the electrician came for the lighting, he said, "How long have you been working like this?" And we didn't. Then we felt bad because we've always worked like that. So there are just some things that that we need to do that are more of an infrastructure kind of a deal to update the building. There are lots of Carnegie libraries in South Dakota. Some of them are pristine and beautiful, and some of them have trees growing out the windows. And we would like for ours to be at least kind of cool. You know, it's a cool building. So these are some of the things that we have done over the last 5 years, and we have had grant money, and we're not demanding that this all be fixed immediately on someone else's part. We understand that this is your building, but we use it. And part of what we wanted to do was show you what needs to be done to bring the building up to an attractive, well cared for building. But we need help. We can't get grants for all of, well, we could probably get grants for all of this, but it would probably take 8 or more years, because some places you can only apply for once, and then if we get denied, then we have to wait for the next thing. And so we're just looking for some assistance in making your building really fabulous.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilman Danforth?
These are really don't have anything to do with the repairs that are needed, but just general questions about your building.
Sure.
Do you have 3 floors, and you got the basement and then 2 levels, main level and then the upper level?
When the building was originally built in 1906, it had 2 floors. It had a basement and a main floor. But then in the 1940s, they ran out of room for the books, and so they built a kind of a loft in one of the big rooms, and that's where our military exhibits are now. So it's only, I want to say it's around 1,000 square feet. Maybe it's more than that. I don't have the map with me or the plans right now. But it's a very small room on the second floor.
And that's all that's used on the second floor up there?
We have a lot of storage. We have storage. The building itself is 6,000 square feet, and we use some for storage. We have storage in this building, and we have storage in the International Harvester building, and we're trying to get that organized. But yes, there are 3 floors.
Okay, so the 6,000 square feet is total of
The
all
building where we are.
everything, all levels?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does the basement get used by the public, or is that purely storage?
No, what we did was we moved some of the storage around so that we could offer up more exhibit space, and that's also our research area. The basement, we have a big table. We have all of our research books. That's where we let researchers set up if they're going to do a whole afternoon of looking for things. And then that's also where we have History Club. That meets once a month. And then we also use the basement for the murder mystery and for children's programs. The basement has exhibits. Some of how we lay out the museum depends on where the stuff is, because the piano is in the basement, and so it's going to stay there because it's heavy. And the blue cast iron stove that 4 grown men can't lift is on the first floor, so that's where that stays. So we kind of work around where the heaviest items in the collection are, but we do use the basement quite a bit. That's where all of our board meetings and our history club, and that's where the table and chairs are.
Have a comment that if you want to feel like you take a step back in time and you love the smell of old books, that basement is the best place to go.
Yes, we recently got a picture of Mrs. Hipp, and so we're going to do a children's library exhibit with a full-size cutout of Helen Hipp.
Councilman Y?
Does the lease between the museum and the city specify who's responsible for these repairs?
Well, I've read it, and I don't fully understand all of it. It says that we need to get your permission. It says that any repairs to the roof of the structure erected thereon may need at the present time. I I think that means that the roof is our deal, but we have paid for repairs to the roof. We had the roof repaired last summer, and we've had it repaired in 2013 and 2015. So we have repaired the roof. The problem is it's a flat roof, and it's tricky. You know, one leak only leaks if the rain and wind come hard from the south. That leak is hard to find unless we have a good southern storm. Also, we have trouble finding all the leaks and things because it's the roof, then 2 feet of air, then 1.5 feet of insulation, then the ceiling. But the ceiling is not all level, so where the water comes through may have no correlation to where the hole is. So I can't get up there because you have to climb like a 20-foot ladder or have somebody bring in equipment. So we have paid for repairs, and I don't know, maybe Joy Nelson wants to speak about the lease because she knows leases.
Joy Nelson, and I'm on the board of the directors for the Kyneton County Historical Society. Christy's done a really good job of doing the repairs, in the last few years, and the lease does speak to the Historical Society doing the repairs. However, some of the things that need to be done, I think, fall under the classification of capital improvements rather than repairs. And I think what would be of paramount importance is the roof. We repaired it several times, and the last contractor that we had come to look said it's at a point where it just needs a new roof. And so we try to do all the repairs as the lease does speak to, but I think we're down to a point now where it's been enough years and it's an old enough building that we might be talking some capital improvements. And that's where we're trying to solicit some help from you. And Christy will continue to try to get some grant relief from this also. But if you too see that some of these things are capital improvements, we'd like to solicit some help from the city.
Okay.
And
Other comments? Roger?
And I just want to say, Christy can also tell you the problem we have actually getting contractors to come in and do the work. It's tough getting them to come and look at what needs to be done, much less getting the actual work done. Christy could talk about that for days.
Yeah.
I've heard her, so.
Glenn, just a further comment too. I understand your question at the last meeting, but the Historical Society does not have the funds to sustain itself, okay? So through memberships, fundraising, grants is what keeps it going. So we try not to invade, that corpus whatsoever. It is not a restricted fund. However, if it goes away, we don't have operating to stay open. So it is not restricted funds. Okay.
Any other questions or concerns? Well, thank you very much. We appreciate the extra information. It's very helpful. Is there anyone else that would like to move forward, or to come forward and make a public comment? See none, I'll move to item 3, approval of minutes from the April 16, 2018 meeting. Is there moved by Councilman Solom? Second by Councilman Albertson. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 4 is discussion on revenue for Prairie Lakes Wellness Center sponsorship agreements.
Really don't have anything to act on today. There's a couple more potential sponsors that are getting close, but nothing that we're ready to act on at this point.
This is about,
This is more from at the last council.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
My bad.
So at the last council meeting, when we approved the last 2 sponsorship agreements with VAST and Dakota Bank, the question came up of where do we put the revenue that's coming in. So I said that I'd bring it to the next finance committee and we could kind of have the discussion there to get some people's thoughts on doing that. Currently, the main one from Prairie Lakes is going into the Fund 504, and that was put aside more for the construction part of it. Kind of what I gathered in that short discussion was to put this into the Prairie Lakes Wellness Center's fund. I think the big question is, do we want to assign it at all, or do we want it to cover more of the operational costs as far as utilities? personnel, stuff like that. So I'd open it up to the committee.
I guess from a practical standpoint, does it make a whole lot of difference, Kristen?
I would say no. I think, I don't know if with the amount of dollars, I can see it being used more for the operational at this point to cover some of those. I know last year the utilities are quite a bit higher than at the previous facility. So my recommendation is to definitely take it into the wellness center instead of the capital project fund that was set up to build it. But I don't see the need to assign it for capital improvements at this time.
I would definitely concur with that, just one person's thought.
What about that capital fund was set up for multiple facilities, and it was used for 2 facilities so far, and there's still one that isn't built yet. If it's put in that, then you can look at it from that angle.
You can. I will say, though, our other agreement that we had for the Premier Softball is going into the capital project. So that project itself is putting back in to fund 504 as well. I think those could be viewed a little bit differently, as those came about a little bit at the time, too, of the construction of the facilities, where these 2 are following a little bit after.
If the 3rd facility is built, then the funds that were directed to that fund would be redirected, and that's not a big deal to redirect funds from sponsorship agreements that would be continuing beyond. So how many year some of these sponsorship agreements will extend beyond. We'll get an annual amount for a number of years, and if that goes beyond, I don't know if the ones that were redirected into 504 qualify that way, or if they were lumps.
No, there are payments over, I think one's 5 years. I'm not sure on the other one. A lot of it will depend on even just the construction of the ice arena, how long that would take.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of depends. I mean, at this point, they're still rolling into that. And as far as the financials would go, it would basically depend on if we have any revenue still coming into it. It would remain there where it is.
Okay. I see Colin Paulson came forward. You're on the ice arena committee.
Yes, and that's, I wanted just to bring that up, and I wish Don was here because we had a recent meeting about the financial situation of the ice arena, and we did talk about this fund, and I guess I just wanted to bring that up because we're kind of at that stage where we need to figure out where that funding is coming from, and I'm not trying to sway either way, but I just wanted to bring that up, that was a discussion point at our most recent meeting.
And I think there's less money remaining than was anticipated for the ice arena because we use more for the other facilities.
Don talked about a $3 million void that we were anticipating more funds in there.
And it was expected that would be replenished with sponsorships.
Yes.
That's how I understood it. So, I wasn't part of the council or any, I didn't have any part in that when those conversations were going on, but Councilman Danforth?
I think the issue isn't so much that the funds haven't gotten there as much as we've had higher expected costs.
Yes.
And there's a big difference.
Yes, sorry. And that's actually what Don brought up. He said it's not that we don't have that money. It's just exactly what you said. We were just talking in general about this fund and kind of, I don't want to call them shortfalls, but funding and other stuff that hasn't essentially equated to what was projected.
So if we designate the receipt of those funds into the capital fund and they get in there, do they stay there?
Yes.
Okay.
But you can redirect them. Like I said.
No, you can't put them onto the operations side then once they're in there, correct?
Well, okay, that capital fund is for construction. When construction's done, if you have a 10-year sponsorship agreement directed to the capital fund that's built in for, you have to redirect those funds. I just asked that question.
Right. I'm talking about once the funds are in there, the funds that have been placed there stay there. Okay.
Right.
So if you have a multi-year agreement
The future years
and
aren't
it's
in there yet.
paid for, right?
So-
Right.
Each year
Yeah.
we're doing this,
Right.
correct?
Yes.
And then what happens to that fund if the ice arena is not constructed?
Well, that's a kind of a whole different topic. Then we have $3 million
You have to
of
move
bond
it.
money. Well, no, we can't move it. We established the bond for the purpose of building 3 facilities. And if the ice arena is not constructed, then we need to have a further conversation about what to do with the $3 million. And there's options, but there again, that would have to be further discussed. So as far as the bond money and the other agreements that were signed, the $2 million and I can't remember what Premier's was. Those are a little bit different in my opinion compared to the 2 that we're discussing right now. Like I said, those came along at the time of the construction of the facilities, and I think that's why the conversation was those should go towards the 504 fund, which was for the construction of the projects. Now, the 2 that we're talking about now, it's been quite a while since the construction, and we're just signing these in. So that's why I think it's only right that they go to the wellness center itself for operation, because I would hope that anything down the line that Premier would get could help facilitate the operating of that facility, and the same for the future ice arena, that if we would get another one, it could go towards the construction, but later on sponsorships would go towards the operation of the facilities.
I think there were 212 second penny funds set aside for the ice arena. Am I right about that?
You are correct. The
And
28
there was also bond money
Okay.
that was intended to be used for the ice arena.
Yes. Currently, in the 504 fund, there is right around $3 million of bond money left. I think it's 2.9. So around there. That is what bond money is left for the ice facility. Also in the 2018 budget, it was approved to transfer $2 million from Fund 212, Capital Improvement Fund, to the Capital Project Fund. So that transfer is happening. It happens every month, and by the end of the year, there will be $2 million in there from the Capital Improvement Fund.
Was that specifically for the ice arena?
It was.
Okay, so we have those, but there's still less money than was anticipated when we went forward with the bonding.
We also do have on the books just there's around $2 million of receivable, so you need to that'll add in there, and that was from the Prairie Lakes agreement as well as the Premier agreement.
Councilman Albertson?
It would seem like we should use that for the operational, to me, just to keep it where it, when somebody went out and recruited the money that we're getting here, put it in that operational, and it sounds like it's a lot easier to get out there than if it gets into capital dollars. And once the budget comes in, once John gives us what it's going to cost for a year, then at least we would have money to help pay for that. So I would suggest operational and not have it go out.
Mayor.
That's a different cat when we start talking about the ice arena. And I certainly hope we haven't even considered not doing that. So,
Councilman Danforth?
I know I've said this in previous council meetings and in other meetings that we've had on this topic, but when we go back and we go to the time that we were planning the bond, planning the facilities, the intent at that time was, I'm trying to think, in those discussions originally started with Mayor Williams and then went on to Mayor Thorson. But the intent was for the facility naming rights to go into the construction fund, and that any additional sponsorships or signage, whatever, within any one of these facilities would go back to itself.
Okay.
That was the intent.
Yeah.
Now, I know things change, And then that act, subsequently, that changed somewhat, and where for the wellness facility, it was agreed that the Prairie Lakes naming rights would go back to the construction, and then if we got to the point where we were able to get a sponsor for like the aquatics, a naming rights for the aquatics area, and a naming rights for the large gym, for that was the 2 additional areas we talked about. Not a sponsorship like you would have a sign somewhere, but literally a naming rights. So it's the Mayor Karen Aquatic Center, that it was agreed that those monies then under the naming rights scenario would go back to construction.
Okay.
But sponsorships and signage that's sold within there would go back into the operating funds for each facility.
Okay, I understand.
Now that's all
I can see
history.
that logic.
Yeah, that's history, but that's how we kind of got to where we are today. And I agree, we need to get this settled so they know where they're at, and we also need to get to know that so that we can have our budget planning for
Right.
our facilities and know exactly what to do. So.
Right. Are you looking for a recommendation, or was this just information?
I mean, I'd like a recommendation from the committee. Just, I think we've discussed that it's going to go to Prairie Lakes Wellness Center Fund. But if they want any type of assignment to it, do you want it assigned for capital or just let it go into operational?
Well, I'll move that the dollars come into the Prairie Lakes Wellness Fund for operations.
Okay, we have a motion by Vilhauer and a second by Solom. Any further discussion?
Mayor, I do have one question on that. And does that then, Glenn, only about the ones that are on the table now, or does that pertain to if somebody comes in and wants to name the aquatics area? We should be able to make a decision in a direction of which way we want to go, I think. So what
I was referring to what we've got on the table currently. I mean, if there's something that does come in, like you're referring to, Mike, then I might have a different thought at that point.
Yeah. Okay. Any other further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, item number 5 is update on property insurance claim. Is this Kristen?
Thank you. This is just kind of a update. In July 2017, when the hailstorm came through, after that, the city requested that all of our buildings be looked at to see if there was any damage. About a month ago, I think, is when the claims adjusters came in and provided us with information regarding the damage from that storm. The city had close to $2 million worth of hail damage to all the properties. All of it was to the roofs. It wasn't any of the actual sides of the buildings or anything. The majority of that damage was cosmetic. It was not considered functional. A lot of it was due to metal roofing that would have the dings and stuff like that. So that's what they consider cosmetic. Around $100,000 was considered functional damage. All of the functional damage sits within the Park and Rec Fund, and that is a lot of the shingled roofs, our shelters and concession stands and stuff like that is what had more of the functional damage. I did get a group together. Utilities was involved, as well as a couple council members, and then as well as the departments that really had the majority of the damage. And we spoke with South Dakota Public Assurance Alliance, which is our insurance carrier, about different options and kind of what to do with that. The group decided to take the full claim at this time and to set the money aside in those departments that had the damage, and it would be assigned then for future capital improvements if repairs do need to be made or if down the road any other type of improvement needs to happen. What that amounts to in regards to insurance is with this size of a claim, we would lose what is our loss ratio credit. That is around $25,000 a year, and we would lose that for about 3 years. So we're talking a total credit loss to our premiums of $75,000 over 3 years. I do want to point out the majority of the cosmetic damage in the general fund, with kind of all the departments that's in the general fund, it was around $150,000. Parks and Rec, their cosmetic was around $220,000, and wastewater was $1.5 million. So wastewater really was the main, and a lot of that was the big domes that are out there, had a lot of, I suppose, the denting in the metal. So if there's any questions, like I said, this was kind of just an update to what the group kind of decided. I think utilities discussed it at their board meeting as well. So I'm open to any questions.
Councilman Vilhauer?
I think one other point or thing to point out, Kristen, is you mentioned the loss reserve ratio that we would lose for the next 3 years. We had all, and I was one of the parties from the council. Don Roby was the other one that was part of this. One of the things that was a concern too is, okay, what's this going to do to our overall premiums going forward? And I think the feedback that we got was, well, this loss is being spread over, 425 members, that we probably wouldn't see an appreciable overall increase in our premiums aside from losing that loss reserve ratio. Is that a fair statement, Kristen?
That is correct.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councilman Danforth?
Is there any holdback on this? Because I know on the home claims, I can't, let's say, for example, I got a house and I've got $20,000 worth of roof damage. I don't get that $20,000. I get, maybe I get $12,000. They hold the rest of it back.
Right.
And you would only ever get that if the bills for repair justified it.
That's correct.
Does that same thing hold true here?
That's correct. So when I said the $2 million, that's taking into account that we will not be fixing those items at this time. The actual total loss replacement cost value is $2.5 million. So that then takes into account the difference between the two.
Okay, so you have already adjusted that. You're only
Yeah.
communicating the net number
Yes.
in the event that,
Yep.
okay, all right.
That's referred to as the actual cash value and the replacement cost.
And just to clarify, let's say it's, with a few years down the road, we have another storm that causes damage. This would be taken into consideration at that time to figure out what kind of coverage or what kind of compensation we might get at that point.
Any other questions or comments? All right, you didn't need any action. All right, moving on. Item number 6 is discussion on upgrading streetlight poles and fixtures in conjunction with the U.S. Highway 212 Phase 2 construction project. And Shane is here, and we also have the H2020 members here to talk about this. I'll tell you what's going on. We're going to have a major reconstruction of the highway going through town, and this doesn't happen very often, probably once during our career. And so if there's any change that we would want to make, this would be the time to make it. And the H2020 group had looked at lots of different ways to upgrade the appearance of Highway 212 in conjunction with that project. And I think I would like for them to talk about what they asked for and what's left over that hasn't been rejected, and then we can talk about costs.
Thank you, Mayor Karen and City Council for considering this. I'm Diane Stiles, and I'm part of a subcommittee of H2020 that has really focused on the Highway 212 improvement project. And our subcommittee is on the beautification of 212. What we want to do is invite, whether it's future citizens or visitors to Watertown, we want to give them an inviting front door. So we started out asking for the world, and Shane was very patient with us, but we don't mind being told no, so we're pretty persistent. So we had started out, and we wanted like the medians grassy medians with trees in them. We had talked about lighting options, sidewalk options, bridge options. So we had a pretty extensive project when we first started, but then we realized that not all of that was attainable, especially when you consider the financial cost of it, and then also just the logistics of snow removal. I'm from Kansas, and so we can have medians, and then South Dakota after this winter, I understand that we cannot have medians for the snow removal piece of that. So the last kind of step that we have, there's a few things that looking forward we could still accomplish, and the lighting is one of the main focuses. So if you've driven through Brookings lately, they went for the upgraded lighting option, so that it's the black, more historic light pole rather than the Cobra head light poles, which I learned from that term from Mayor Karen. And so instead of using those Cobra head lights, it's the more decorative light pole. Downtown Rapid City is another example of that. And so we're hoping that that you guys would consider doing some type of cost agreement to upgrade those light poles during phase 2. Right now phase 1 is complete, and so it's not really on the table, but phase 2 would have the most impact anyway. So that would be great. There were some upgrades to the bridges, which we're very grateful for. And the idea is that we would tie all of this together, and it would be inspired by other elements that are already in the community. So starting with the Redland Art Center, the great fence that you guys put up at the zoo, and stick to that constant theme to tie our community together. So that's kind of an overview of where we are, and then hopefully in the future we would have some updated entrance signage, and there's a few elements like that we could still build upon.
Thank you, Diane.
Thanks.
And so Shane's been working with the DOT to try and figure out how much it would cost to upgrade the lighting, and we just hot off the press got an email. So Shane, I'll let you explain that.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. They separated their costs into 3 columns. I'll point to the farthest column first. This is what they predict their standard lighting system would be. They're 50-foot poles. There's 22 poles in the phase 2 corridor, I'll call it. And that corridor is primarily between Highway 81 and 19th Street East. So that's the area that we're talking about for decorative lighting. Then
Shane,
yep.
It's $153,000.
Yes, $153,300 approximately.
Excuse me. And just to clarify, the DOT would pay that tab.
Correct. Yep. No matter what option we choose, that's what they're planning to spend based on their estimates. So when we looked at, there's multiple options, and there's a 40-foot tall decorative pole and a 30-foot decorative pole, and of course, the main difference between those is the amount of light that they're able to cast onto the street. So if you look at it, the 40-foot pole would increase the number of lights needed from 22 to 46, and then the 30-foot pole would increase that number to 58. So that's really how the primary driver to the increased cost. And then the state did a very good job of breaking down all the extra costs. I mean, they even put in extra wiring for each of the bases, and that would be required. So bottom line is they have a $702,000 cost for a 40-foot pole configuration, and with their portion of the 153, that would reduce the city's portion to $549,000 roughly. And if you went with the 30-foot pole, there's $663,000. I think what happens is the extra cost, the main difference between these, of course, is the extra 10 feet of fixture. Even though there's more fixtures, there's less material because you have less height. So ironically, the 30-foot option costs $663,000, and if you take the state's portion of it, it's $510,000. I was actually looking at those numbers to be flipped, where the 40-foot pole option would be less expensive than the 30, but their numbers are what they are, and
the poles are 10 feet shorter,
right?
But they're spaced more closely together. Right. So it actually, the taller pole costs more than the more closely spaced pole.
Right, and I wasn't anticipating that differential would be enough to flip that. I was actually thinking the 30-foot pole would be more costly because you added more lights. But these are the numbers they produced for us, and this is what we have to consider as a community if we want to invest in decorative lighting in the Phase 2 corridor.
Okay, Councilman Bueller?
I have a quick question. Maintenance-wise, when we go to this number, and I'm assuming these are LED lighted poles,
yes.
How would that affect our maintenance? And I don't know how much maintenance there are to these things. I don't think LEDs is a big issue. I don't think they have to be replaced that often, I don't believe. But as far as just the upkeep, are these like a Core 10? You don't paint something surface on these?
There are options. The costs presented here are a painted pole, and that's powder coated. So the paint does last a substantial amount longer. The standard lighting that the DOT puts in there is a fairly weathering material so that they have very little maintenance on it. So to say that these decorative poles won't have any maintenance is probably not correct. So we would look at eventually needing to do some touch-up painting or complete painting at some point in their life cycle. And we have had a conversation with the municipal utilities that, they're aware that they have to stock a certain amount of replacement poles and fixtures and materials so that if one gets run over by a vehicle or knocked over by weather or something like that, that they have that inventory to replace it. And the other thing that we talked about too is that styles of light poles change over time, and so you may not always have an exact replica, say 10-15 years from now if you ran short on your inventory. But the goal would be is that we recognize that there are some operating costs and try to account for that as we go forward.
Also, besides the maintenance part of that, I think, let me ask, have we talked to anybody in any other communities that have used these for a period of time to see how they're working out for them, this type of pole, and then the safety issue as well? Do you see any safety issues, additional safety issues by having that concentration of poles?
I don't anticipate any safety issues. All of the poles are going to be roughly the same distance off of the traveled roadway and essentially along parking areas. So, unless somebody's impaired or has something going on that creates a obvious differential in how they operate a motor vehicle, I don't anticipate any issues from a safety standpoint. Having more poles, of course, does increase the opportunities to have incidents happen. But the municipal utilities did reach out to Brookings and ask some questions about how they did their decorative lighting, and I just had some basic information from Rapid City. I have not talked to any
nobody that's had them long term. We haven't talked to anybody that's had them long term. The DOT cover letter did say, though, that and you can see, we can see from here that the vast majority of the cost is in the pole, not in the luminaire fixture and the arm. It's in the pole, and so if we kept the decorative luminaire and arm, but went with a simpler pole and maybe a less expensive finish, that might cut the cost dramatically. And they suggested we look into that. And so I think we probably should. Councilman Solom?
Do you have a picture of what these would look like?
I do not, because there's so many options. We haven't really gotten down to that level of detail yet because we didn't want to expend all that effort without knowing if there's a base
you can
to go forward.
Just look downtown. There are decorative poles downtown at the Redland Center. There are decorative poles, and you can see them around. And actually, when you leave, look at County Fair parking lot, because there's traditional standard Cobra head poles in the street, and then along 2nd Avenue we have, or 2nd Street, we have decorative poles. Councilman Y?
Shane, this is just for phase 1 of the project. Then we'd be looking at this or this is the whole project.
Phase 1 was, that decision was made already, and that window of opportunity is closed. This is only for phase 2.
So we would have decorative poles.
Just in that first part from 19th Street to Highway 81. West of Highway 81, not so much.
And we can't change that or
We can't
go
change
back.
that now. It's too late. Councilman Danforth.
I'm assuming that these dollars, when would phase 2 be? 2020?
21.
2021? The question I would have is, I'm assuming the $510,000 or $550,000 would come out of our capital side of our budget, or?
Well, we, in Brookings, they fundraised with other sources. So the community came out and did some donations. Companies made donations. We could take it right out of 100% out of city funds. Could ask municipal utilities to partner in some of the cost. We could ask the community to participate. That's entirely up to the council.
Yeah, but the reason why I asked that, Mayor, is because, we're just sitting here 10 minutes ago talking about capital dollars for a new facility, and then we're talking about another $500,000 of capital coming from somewhere. And I'm just saying, somewhere along the line, I like the idea of it, because I think something needs to happen on 212. But again, I go back to the dollars and go, where do we balance this all out? Is my only point on
but
it.
the issue is we have one shot at improving the look of that corridor during this construction project, and after that, it's kind of too late. We'll lose the fact that the DOT is replacing the poles at that time, and that would be the best time to do it if you're so inclined. So you need to decide if you want an upgraded look to our community, how much are you willing to pay for it? Because it's one thing to want it, it's another thing to pay for it. And how much is it worth for the image to be different? Councilman Vilhauer?
I've got a question specifically on the estimate. First of all, Shane, the very first line item, footing 2-foot diameter, is that for the extra land that would have to be acquired then from the various property owners along that stretch?
I don't know how they incorporated the land component here. These, I believe, are just material costs. I don't believe it reflects the footings. That's the foundation that each pole would have to be put on.
Okay.
And for some reason, they do that by foot of depth or something like that, because that's how they seem to be broken out.
Okay. And then just a couple of comments. Diana, Luann, Shane, Mayor, you were at the utility board meeting Monday, as was I. Now, we did not have the price at that meeting, but I will say this, and I can't speak for the board, but I think I have had a pretty good sense from the board itself that there was definitely some interest on their part in sharing somewhat in this project. But again, no dollars were presented at that point. So again, I obviously can't speak for them, but I know there was interest on their part to entering into some kind of agreement or relationship with the city on this. I would say to them, I look at this as being an economic development potential. I mean, I think back to, I know Terex, for example, that was one of the points that they raised in their whole conversations with us too, is that, enhancing the appearance or look of 212 through town was something that they had in their mind. So, I mean, the aesthetics would be wonderful. I mean, the economic development potential, and you're right, Mayor. I mean, this is one shot at this, and if we don't do it now, we are not going to be able to do it. I guess what concerns me is one, yes, the cost concerns me, and secondly, Shane, do you want to talk about what kind of timeline we're under? Because as I understand it, we need to make up our mind this relatively quickly if we are going to do something out of the ordinary.
Correct. The reason this is time sensitive is because right now they're planning on obtaining easements or land for 22 poles, and if they need to collect those type of documents from all the landowners for 58 or 46 poles, that greatly increases their amount of work that they have to do and obtain the space that the poles are going to occupy. And the whole project has a taking, I'm going to call it, of property from the adjacent property owners. They're adding a 6-foot sidewalk along both sides of the roadway throughout the whole corridor. But then that means that these light poles then would be another footprint outside of that sidewalk. So that's why it's very important for the DOT to know whether they're pursuing that land acquisition at this point in time, because it's going to increase their amount of man hours and their approach to that project. And I know 2021 sounds like a long ways off, but when you're acquiring land from that many property owners, it takes time, and they're even struggling getting all the documents still in line for the phase 1 project. So that's the reason this is time sensitive, and I think that they would like to know whether they're committed to both the design element and the property acquisition element for the phase 2 project.
Councilman Albertson?
It would seem like that if we're going to do that, that the decorative way, and I don't know about the poles. Diane, do you have a sense at all if a different pole and what you were thinking would change the aesthetics of it?
You know, I think if I could speak on behalf of the committee, I think any upgrade would be appreciated. If you can't afford, you know, what we have proposed here, even like the idea of upgrading the luminaries would be advantageous. I know you have to budget or you have to balance a lot of different needs in your budget, and so we just hope that there's some type of upgrade that will help welcome people into the community. This was the first time I saw the numbers, and so actually the 30-foot pole is what we were hoping for. So that was going to be something that would be more in eyesight and it would have a greater effect on the community. So I was pleased to see that it came back less expensive, but.
Okay.
Councilman Lallam?
Really what this comes down to is the aesthetics of our community, and this is from 19th to 81, is that what I was hearing?
Yes.
Okay. It's a very large number, differences between the two of them. You're talking 150 to 510. I mean, obviously the one they're paying for, it's a large number, but if we're going to drastically change the entire look of the community by changing 212, expanding it, adding the sidewalks and stuff, we have to look at this as more of an opportunity. If we can get someone to partner in with us, if the utilities is willing to take on some of that, we can raise public money. You know, it's a overall aesthetics, and we're hoping that the businesses will follow in line with new signage and things of that nature as well, so that it makes us look cleaner and not so cluttered. I think it's an opportunity that we have to look at and see if we can go forward with it, whether it's this particular one or, you know, something that's maybe a little on the less expensive but has an aesthetically pleasing look to it. I think we should definitely look at doing something like that.
Thank you. Councilwoman Manti, were you wanting to make a comment?
Mayor Karen?
Yes.
One of the things about this pole that I learned from Shane was that it's not just a light pole. It also has the decorative banner,
yes,
and then also the flag poles. So it does have a little bit of an upgrade beyond just the basic function of a light pole.
Yes, thank you for adding that. Councilman Vilhauer?
Would it be appropriate, because we can't make any kind of decision today, but I also realize that we need to make a decision this in the near future. Would it be appropriate to get together a small group from this body, as well as the utility board, as well as staff and H2020 group, to review this within the next month or so and see what we can come up with as far as fine tune some of the costs, see who's willing to pay what, and then come back both here and the utility board within the next month or so and see where we're at that point.
I think that's a great idea, and I think there's a lot of room here. In the cover memo that came with the message from the DOT, they basically said they're looking at one example, and there's a ton of examples out there that we could work with and maybe get those costs down and still have an upgraded look. So I think there's room for that.
I figured out.
Councilman Danforth.
Just for clarification, if we go from the 22 poles, which is what they've been planning from a land acquisition standpoint, to either of the options, the 46 or the 56 total poles, who pays for that cost of those additional locations? Is that something that would be on our shoulders above and beyond the 22?
Okay, what they do, and we just did this on the phase 1 project with the bridge railing, they do a cost estimate of what it costs for their standard railing, and then they did the cost estimate on the upgraded railing. And
I'm
we
not
paid,
sure that applies, though, to property acquisition. They
Well,
haven't told us
yeah.
that they would ask us
Oh,
to
okay.
cost share on the property
No,
acquisition.
that could be an additional cost, or
I
it may
think
not
you
be.
need to ask that immediately, but I haven't seen that in the past ever.
Okay, okay.
So whatever we are doing, they've paid for the property acquisition, and we've paid for the structures that are
Yeah.
above and beyond.
I think that would be a
that's correct.
very important
But
detail
you
to
should
know
ask that right then.
factually. Yeah.
I will do that. And I also will reach out and find out if they haven't told me a concrete date on when we have to make a decision. I probably should ask that question too, so that whatever meetings we want to set up, that we set them up according to the timeline that they want to have us close that decision by. So I will reach out to that as well.
Okay. Councilwoman
Santee? I think in support of this project, and that's a great idea to get a group of people together, all along the group I've been in your offshoot of it, we've been continually trying to create decorative corridors to the city's downtown. And so if you take up near Hobby Lobby and you go through that, my kids call it the Rainbow Road, and then you get into First, it doesn't take long before you get into the decorative light poles as you go towards the downtown. And you've done a good job of that one corner that, looks good from LATI. So looking at this, I had to have Josh draw me a map. That's why it took me so long. I'm sorry. But if you look at this, 19th is also a way to get straight up and over 81. There's several different ways to get into our business district from 81 or from 212. And if we want to build some consistency into that, and if we haven't decided yet whether First is going to be our main entry or Kemp or whatever, like you've all said, we don't want to miss this opportunity. But I think this ties in to what other groups in H2O have been trying to accomplish. And so that, to me, would be another really important factor to consider, because there's no sense having modern here and antique here and, whatever, because that's going to look worse. And so I am hoping that you will be successful in getting, the costs to where we can all say, yeah, that'll work. But do keep in mind that anytime we create this type of decorative, we are improving not only 212, but we are improving all our ways to get people to our downtown.
Yes. Councilman Lallam?
I was just going to add one thing, piggybacking on Beth's. If we can get some photos that will match up with what we currently have in our areas, you guys have done a nice job around LATI. And I know that we have some decorative lighting, sporadically. So let's see if we can't get a plan going where if we end up going that route, let's get it across the board. It's just something that we're going to have to slowly work on doing. So if we can get some photos together, if they do that group, put some photos to what we currently have as well as what's available that's a similar style. May not be exact, but it's similar.
Great idea.
Like a map.
Absolutely.
Map it out.
Yep.
Yes. Other comments or questions?
one.
Councilman Bueller?
I'd just like to say thanks for identifying the opportunity, because this might have been overlooked, and getting on it in a timely fashion so that we can get it taken care of. And I think Glenn's idea of a committee, too, to kind of study this and see what options are out there that we could get our best bang for our buck, I guess, moving forward. And I'd be happy to assist in that regard, too. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for considering this request.
All right, the next item on the agenda is authorization for the mayor to sign the addendum to the City of Watertown Development Company property purchase. Shane, don't leave yet. And development agreement. If you could bring that up on the GIS, the Endries Industrial Park intersection of 29th Street and 15th Avenue South. We have a development agreement to develop the new industrial park with Watertown Development Company. We're essentially partners with them in that property. And we had previously acquired that little corner lot. That was the first part that we acquired. The intention was this was all going to be part of our agreement to develop an industrial park. And when we did the agreement, it only included the new land that we bought. It's separated physically from, the two parts are separated by an easement and a little piece of land there. So it's not contiguous, but it can all be developed together in concert with Watertown Development Company assisting us in that process, as they normally do on our industrial park developments. And so this addendum was drafted to include that little strip in the part that we already have executed for the new industrial park down below. So I'm looking for a motion to recommend that you authorize my signature on the addendum to that agreement for the greater part.
So moved.
Motion by Albertson, second by Vilhauer. Any questions or discussion?
That road that goes through there, what happens to that, Mayor? You said there was just that little roadway that will angle down through there?
That's not a road, that's a pipeline.
Oh, a pipeline.
And we don't have any rights to it. It separates the two. And we could someday possibly negotiate a road to cross it, but right now we don't have any rights to it. And that's how the negotiation went. Any other questions or comments? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 8 is old business. Is there any old business? Number 9, new business. There's no need for executive session, so I'll look for a motion second to adjourn. Moved by Solom, second by Vilhauer. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned.